That is a compelling request. I can certainly rewrite and expand the story, keeping the original length, intense psychological drama, and mounting suspense, while ensuring the language is polished and the narrative flow is captivating. Here is the full, rewritten story, maintaining the original thrill and length. My in-laws are inviting us to dinner tonight, Raphael told me yesterday afternoon. He was smiling like a child, as if nothing bad could ever happen in this world. As if love was enough to shield him from everything. I just nodded. I just said yes. Because that's what I do. I've always said yes. I've always been there. Quiet. Invisible. The mother who doesn't bother anyone. The mother who doesn't ask questions. The mother who accepts whatever she's given. But that night, sitting at that long, cold table with white tablecloths that looked more like a shroud than a celebration, something inside me began to break. And it wasn't the sound of the plates. It wasn't the clinking of the glasses. It was the silence. That dense, suffocating silence that falls on a woman when no one looks at her anymore. When no one expects anything from her. When she's just a body taking up space in a chair. One more name on the guest list. The groom's mother. Nothing more. Raphael was radiant. He had that light in his eyes that only men in love have, or blind men. Sometimes, it's the same thing. Fabiana was by his side, beautiful, elegant, with that Italian accent that sounded like music. She moved her hands when she talked. She laughed loudly. She touched Raphael's arm with a familiarity that hurt me, not out of jealousy, but because I no longer received those gestures. It had been years since my son had touched me like that, with affection, with presence. I was a piece of furniture in his life, useful when needed, forgettable when not. Alma, Fabiana's mother, was sitting across from me, tall, imposing, with perfectly styled brown hair and jewels that sparkled under the dining room light. She was smiling, too, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. It was a polite smile, the kind you use in photos, in formal meetings, at funerals. I tried to be nice. I tried to make conversation, but my words fell to the floor like stones. No one picked them up. No one listened to them. Dinner dragged on slowly, endlessly. I ate in silence. I watched. I listened. Raphael talked about his plans, about the wedding, about the honeymoon, about the house they were buying. A big house, modern, with a yard. I smiled when he said it would have a room for me, a guest room, because that's what I am now, a guest in my own son's life. Fabiana and Alma spoke to each other in Italian. Sometimes, not all the time, only when they wanted to say something Raphael wasn't supposed to understand yet, or that I was never supposed to understand. But I understood every word, every syllable, every pause, every stifled laugh. I understood because I lived in Italy. 15 years of my life were spent in Florence, working, studying, loving, losing. But nobody knows that, not even Raphael, because he never asked. He never cared where his mother came from. He only cared that she was there, quiet, available, invisible. Then Raphael stood up. He said he was going to take the plates to the kitchen. He was always polite, always helpful. I taught him that, to respect, to help, to not let women carry the whole burden alone. How ironic, because now he leaves me alone, carrying the weight of this loneliness, of this silent abandonment, of this living death that is being a forgotten mother. As soon as Raphael left the dining room, everything changed. Fabiana leaned toward her mother. Alma moved closer to her, and they started talking in Italian quickly, quietly, as if sharing a delicious secret. And they laughed. My God, how they laughed, with that laugh that isn't joy. It's cruelty. It's contempt. It's the sound evil makes when it feels safe. When it thinks no one is watching, when it thinks the victim doesn't understand. But I understood. Every word, every insult, every taunt. Fabiana said I looked like a peasant, that my hands were rough, that my clothes were cheap, that I smelled old. Alma laughed. She said it didn't matter, that soon I wouldn't be a problem, that after the wedding, Raphael would do whatever they said, that men in love are easy to manage, that I would be sent to some nursing home or simply forgotten like an old dog that's no longer useful. And then they said something else, something that chilled my blood. Fabiana said Raphael had a lot of money, more than she thought. That she had seen the documents, the bank accounts, the properties, everything. Alma asked how much. Fabiana named a number, $200,000 in savings, a paid-off house, investments. Alma let out a low laugh. Deep. Satisfied. She said everything would go according to plan, that after the wedding they would transfer everything little by little without him noticing. And when there was nothing left, they would disappear, just like they always did, just like they always did. Those 3 words stabbed me like knives because they meant this wasn't the first time. That my son wasn't the first. That there were other men, other victims, other broken hearts and empty accounts. And my Raphael, my boy, my only son, was about to become just one more. An anecdote they would tell while laughing at some other table in some other country with some other lovesick fool. I just sat there, still, motionless, with my hands in my lap, my gaze fixed on my empty plate. I didn't say anything. I didn't move. I didn't let my face reveal a thing. Because I have learned to be invisible. I have learned to disappear. I have learned that women like me survive by becoming shadows. By ceasing to exist for others. By becoming nothing. But inside, something was waking up. Something dark. Something cold. Something that had been asleep for years, decades, a whole lifetime of silence, of obedience, of acceptance. It was ending. Because a mother can endure anything, any humiliation, any pain. But she cannot stay still when they are about to destroy her son. She cannot remain silent when they are about to steal everything from him. His money, his future, his dignity, his life. Raphael came back from the kitchen, smiling, oblivious, happy. He sat down next to Fabiana. She caressed his cheek, said something sweet to him in Italian, something about love, about the future, about eternity. He looked at her as if she were an angel. And I looked at them, at all 3 of them, at the 2 snakes and my lamb. And I thought about how easy it would be to say everything right now. To scream, to reveal, to expose. But I didn't. Because that wasn't the moment. Because revenge isn't a shout. It's a whisper. It's patience. It's strategy. It's waiting for the exact moment for the truth to strike like lightning and destroy everything. Fabiana and Alma looked at me for a second. Their eyes met mine. And in that instant, I saw something in their faces. It wasn't fear. It was contempt. It was that absolute certainty that I was nothing. That I didn't matter. That I didn't understand. That I was just a silly old woman who would soon be discarded. And I let them think that. I let them believe they had won. That I was harmless. That I was invisible. But they didn't know. They didn't know who I was before I became this silent woman. They didn't know I had survived worse things, greater losses, deeper pains. They didn't know I had learned to speak Italian, not in a classroom, but in the streets of Florence, in the markets, in the hospitals, in the cemeteries. They didn't know that every word they said, every plan they revealed, every cruel laugh they shared was burned into my memory like fire on skin. Dinner ended. We said our goodbyes. Alma gave me a kiss on the cheek, cold, empty. Fabiana hugged me, brief, superficial. Raphael walked me to the door. He asked me if I liked the dinner, if I liked his in-laws, if I was happy for him. I said yes to everything because that's what I'm supposed to say. Because that's what they expect from me. The mother who doesn't cause problems. The mother who just nods. The mother who disappears when she's no longer needed. But as I walked to my car under that dark, starless sky, I was no longer the same woman who had arrived. Something had changed. Something had broken. And something new was being born. Something they didn't expect. Something no one expected. Because silent women aren't always asleep. Sometimes they're just waiting, watching, planning, and when they wake up, the world trembles. Raphael was born in the spring on a cold, rainy day in April. I was 23. I was young. I was strong. I was a different person. A person who no longer exists. A person buried under years of sacrifice and silence. When I held him for the first time, when I felt his warm weight against my chest, when I heard that cry that was pure new life, I thought nothing bad could ever touch me. I thought love was enough. I thought being a mother was the strongest shield in the world. How wrong I was. His father left when Raphael was 4. There was no shouting, no violence. Just one morning he got up, made his coffee, looked at me with those empty eyes that hadn't really seen me in a long time, and said he was leaving. That he had met someone else. That he was sorry. But he wasn't. Not really. Men who leave never feel anything. Just relief. Just the freedom to leave behind what no longer serves them. And I stayed with a small child, with a low-paying job, with an apartment that smelled like dampness and broken dreams. I worked every job, cleaning houses, waiting tables in restaurants, taking care of other people's children while mine waited alone at home. Raphael grew up fast, too fast. Sometimes I'd come home and find him asleep on the sofa with the TV on. Other times, he'd be awake looking at me with those big eyes, asking without words why I was never there, why I always came home late, why I was always tired. But I loved him. God knows I loved him. Every cent I earned was for him. Every extra hour, every double shift, every sleepless night. Everything was for Raphael so he would have clean clothes. So he would eat well. So he could go to school. So he wouldn't feel like he was missing anything. Even if I was missing everything, even if I was disappearing little by little, even if my youth was burning away like a candle no one watches. When Raphael was 12, I got a better job in an office. It didn't pay much, but it was stable. I could get home earlier. I could be with him, cook dinner together, help him with his homework, watch movies on weekends. Those were good years, quiet years. Raphael was a good kid, studious, respectful. Sometimes he asked about his father. I told him he was far away, that he had his own life, that he had left us because he wasn't happy. Raphael would nod. He didn't ask again. He learned early on that there are silences it's better not to break. The years passed. Raphael finished high school. He went to college, studied business, got a job at a big company, started earning good money, much better than me. He bought a car. He moved to a bigger apartment. He'd invite me to dinner on Sundays. Sometimes he'd call during the week. He'd ask how I was, if I needed anything. I always said no, that I was fine, that he shouldn't worry, because that's what mothers do. They protect even from their own needs. Then he met Fabiana. It was 2 years ago on a business trip to Miami. She worked at the hotel where he was staying. That's what he told me. That she was an event coordinator. That she was Italian. That she spoke 4 languages. That she was beautiful and smart. That he'd never met anyone like her. I listened. I smiled. I said I was happy for him. But something in my chest tightened. Something told me this wasn't good. That this wouldn't end well. The first time I saw her was 3 months later. Raphael brought her to dinner. Fabiana walked into my house like someone entering a place unworthy of her presence. She looked around with those critical eyes. She barely touched my hand when I greeted her. She smiled, but it was a cold smile, a polite smile. Raphael didn't notice anything. He was too busy looking at her, too lost in that enchantment that blinds men when they think they've found the perfect woman. During dinner, Fabiana spoke little to me. She answered in monosyllables. She looked at her phone. She spoke to Raphael in English, sometimes in Italian. Soft words, verbal caresses. He melted. I watched. I tried to find something genuine in her, something real, something that justified the light in my son's eyes. But I found nothing. I only saw a calculating woman, a woman who knew exactly what to say, what to do, how to move, how to conquer. When they left, Raphael hugged me. He told me he loved Fabiana, that she was the one, that he had finally found someone special. I told him she seemed very nice, that I was glad to see him happy. I lied. Because that's what mothers do when they know the truth will hurt. When they know their children aren't ready to hear it. When they know they wouldn't be believed anyway. The following months were strange. Raphael started visiting less. The calls became shorter, more spaced out. He always had plans with Fabiana. He was always busy. When I asked how things were, he only talked about her, about how wonderful she was, about how well they got along, about the places they went, about the perfect life they were building. I listened. I nodded. I swallowed the pain of being replaced, of becoming a supporting character in my own son's life. Then one day, Raphael came to my house with news. He was nervous, excited. He had that energy of men who are about to take an important step. He sat me down on the sofa. He took my hands. He told me he had proposed to Fabiana, that she had said yes, that they were getting married in 6 months, that he wanted me to be the first to know. I hugged him. I congratulated him. I told him I was very happy for him. And a part of me was, because he was my son, because I loved him, because I wanted to see him happy. But another part of me, a dark and deep part, felt afraid. I felt something was wrong, that this was all too fast, too perfect, too planned. I asked if he had met Fabiana's family. He said no. That they lived in Italy, that they would come for the wedding, that Fabiana didn't have much contact with them because she had been traveling a lot for work. But that her mother, Alma, was coming next week, that she would stay for a month to help with the preparations, that she wanted to meet me. And so she did. Alma arrived, tall, elegant, with that air of superiority that people have who believe money is the only thing that matters. She greeted me coldly. She sized me up with her eyes like someone looking at an old piece of furniture and deciding if it's worth keeping or throwing out. I tried to be nice. I tried to make conversation. I tried to build a bridge. But she wasn't interested. To her, I was invisible, insignificant, the groom's poor mother, someone to be tolerated out of politeness. Nothing more. The months of preparations were a silent hell. I wasn't involved in anything. Fabiana and Alma decided everything. The venue, the decorations, the menu, the music, the guest list. Raphael would ask my opinion sometimes, but it was just a formality. Everything was already decided. I was just a name on the list, the groom's mother, seated at some faraway table, dressed in whatever they deemed appropriate, quiet, invisible, forgettable. But I watched. I saw how Fabiana managed Raphael, how she pulled him away from me. How every time I called, she found a reason for him to be unable to talk long. How every time I suggested something, she had a better idea. How little by little, my son was becoming a stranger, someone I no longer recognized, someone who no longer needed me. And then came that dinner. That damn dinner the day before the wedding. The dinner where everything changed. Where I stopped being the quiet, invisible mother. Where I discovered my son wasn't just being pulled away from me. He was being destroyed, robbed, emptied. And I was the only one who could see it, the only one who could save him. The only one who understood every word of that macabre plan that Fabiana and Alma had woven with such patience. That night, when I got back to my house, I didn't sleep. I sat in the darkness replaying every word I had heard, every laugh, every detail of the plan. And I knew I couldn't stay silent. Not this time. Not when my son was about to lose everything. Not when I was the only one with the power to stop it. Because I wasn't just a forgotten mother. I was a woman who had survived, who had fought, who had learned that silence isn't weakness, it's strategy. And now it was time to wake up. I couldn't sleep that night, or the next, or the one after that. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard their voices. Those sweet, venomous voices speaking in Italian. Planning, calculating, laughing at my son as if he were a game. As if destroying someone's life was just another day's work for them. As if my Raphael was just another number on their list of victims. I got out of bed at 3 o'clock in the morning. The apartment was silent. That dense silence only people who live alone know, who sleep alone, who cry alone. I went to the kitchen. I made coffee. I sat at the table where Raphael had so often done his homework as a child, where we had eaten breakfast together on Sundays, where I had watched the man grow who was now about to marry a lie. I took out an old notebook, the kind you keep for years without knowing why, and I started to write. Every word I remembered, every phrase I had heard in that dining room, I wrote it all down in Italian first. Then I translated it into Spanish. I needed to see it. I needed to read it. I needed to confirm it hadn't been a nightmare, that I had really heard what I thought I'd heard. Fabiana had said Raphael had $240,000 saved, that she had seen the documents, the bank statements, everything. Alma asked if she was sure. Fabiana said yes, that he had shown her everything when they bought the house together. That he trusted her completely, that he was a lovesick fool like all the others, like always, like every time. Alma had laughed, that laugh that haunted me in the dark. And she said the plan was still the same. Get married, wait 3 months, enough time so he wouldn't suspect, then start transferring the money. Little by little, $5,000 here, $10,000 there, always with excuses. A family emergency in Italy, an investment deal, a unique opportunity. Men in love always say yes. They always trust. They always hand over everything. And when there was nothing left, they would disappear. Fabiana would ask for a divorce. She'd claim incompatibility. She'd take her share of the assets. The house they bought together was in both their names. That meant half was hers. And with a good lawyer, she could get more, much more. Alma said they had contacts, that they had done this before, that they knew exactly how to move every piece. And then Fabiana said something that broke my soul. She said the only good thing was that I wouldn't be a problem. That I was a poor, uneducated old woman. That I had no influence over Raphael. That I would probably end up in a nursing home when I couldn't take care of myself. That no one would listen to a woman like me. Alma agreed. She said, mothers like her are easy to ignore. That sons always choose their wives over their mothers. Always. I read my notes over and over. Every word was a dagger. Not just because they were going to rob my son, but because they were right about one thing. Raphael had chosen her. Not consciously, not maliciously. But he had left me behind. He had turned me into a ghost in his life. And now that ghost was the only person who could save him. The next day, I called Raphael. It was Sunday. We usually had lunch together on Sundays, but we hadn't in weeks. He answered after several rings. He sounded distracted. Busy. I asked if we could meet. He said he was with Fabiana buying things for the honeymoon, that they were very busy, that the wedding was in 5 days. I said I understood, that I just wanted to see him for a moment, that we hadn't talked alone in a long time. There was a silence, long, awkward. Then he said maybe in the afternoon, that he would call me. I hung up. He didn't call. That night I sent him a message. He didn't reply until the next day. It said he was sorry, that he had been exhausted, that he would see me at the wedding, that everything was crazy with the preparations. I read that message and knew I had already lost him. That Fabiana had him completely. That I was just an obstacle to be kept at a distance. But I couldn't give up. I couldn't let this happen. So, I did something I had never done. Something I was ashamed to even think about. I went to the bank. The bank where Raphael had his accounts. I didn't think I'd get anywhere. I had no access to his information. I had no legal right. But I knew one of the employees, Marta, an older woman who had worked there for 30 years. I had cleaned her house for years before I got my office job. We were friends, or something like it. I found her at her desk. She was surprised to see me. It had been a while. I told her I needed a favor, that it wasn't legal, that I would understand if she said no, but that it was for my son, that he was in danger. Marta looked at me with those tired eyes of people who have seen too much. She asked me what I needed. I told her I just wanted to confirm how much money Raphael had in his accounts, nothing more. I didn't want to make any transactions, just to know. Marta hesitated. She looked around. Then she sighed. She told me to wait. She went to her computer. She typed something. She frowned. She wrote something on a piece of paper and passed it to me discreetly. The number was worse than I thought. Raphael had $240,000, not $200,000. Years of work, of saving, of sacrifice, all there waiting to be stolen by two women who saw him as an ATM with feelings. Marta asked if I was okay. I nodded. I thanked her. I left the bank, my legs shaking. That afternoon, I searched the internet. I spent hours reading about marriage fraud, about women who marry men for money, about international schemes, about how they worked. The patterns were always the same. Beautiful women, foreigners, perfect stories, distant families, quick weddings, absolute trust. And then the disappearance, the divorce, the ruin. I found forums, stories, testimonies, destroyed men telling how they lost everything, their savings, their homes, their dignity. Some never recovered. Some declared bankruptcy. Some just disappeared, swallowed by the shame and pain of having been so blind, of having trusted so much, of having loved the wrong person. And then I found something. A news story from 3 years ago from a newspaper in Argentina about 2 Italian women arrested for marriage fraud. They had scammed 5 men out of over $500,000 in total. When I opened the attached photo, my heart stopped. It was them. Fabiana and Alma, younger, with different names, but it was them. The same eyes, the same smile, the same pose of calculated innocence. I read the entire article, shaking. They had been arrested, prosecuted, but something had gone wrong at trial. A legal technicality, lack of hard evidence. They were let go. They disappeared afterward without a trace. And now they were here in my city about to marry my son, about to steal everything from him, about to leave him empty and broken like those other men. I printed the article. I printed the photo. I printed everything. My hands were shaking so much I could barely hold the papers. I had the proof. I had the evidence that Fabiana and Alma were not who they said they were. That this wasn't love. It was a crime, a meticulous plan, a robbery disguised as romance. But then I realized something. If I showed this to Raphael now, 5 days before the wedding, he wouldn't believe me. He'd think I was jealous, that I was making things up to ruin his happiness, that I was a possessive mother who couldn't let go of her son. Fabiana had done a perfect job of pushing him away from me, subtly poisoning our relationship, making me look like a sad, obsolete figure in his life. And even if he believed me, even if he saw the proof, she would find an explanation. She'd say it was a mistake, that it was other people, that it was a mix-up, and he would want to believe her, not me. Why does love do that? It blinds. It deafens. It kills the survival instinct. I sat on my living room floor with the papers scattered around me and I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since Raphael's father left us. I cried for my son, for his innocence, for his blind trust, for all the pain he was about to suffer. And I cried for myself, for being invisible, for having no voice, for not being able to protect him even with the truth in my hands. But then something changed. In the midst of that crying, in the midst of that despair, I felt something new, something I hadn't felt in years. Fury, pure burning rage. I was not going to let this happen. I was not going to sit by and watch them destroy my son. I was not going to be the weak, invisible mother they thought I was. If Raphael wouldn't listen to me now, then I would have to wait. I'd have to be smarter, more patient. I'd have to let the wedding happen. Let them feel safe, victorious. And then when they least expected it, when they thought they had won, I would strike with the truth, with the proof, with the full weight of a mother who has nothing to lose except her son. Because they made a mistake, a fatal mistake. They thought I was invisible. They thought I didn't understand. They thought I didn't matter. But I had heard everything. I knew everything. And now I had proof. I had time. And I had the most powerful advantage of all. They didn't know that I knew. The next day, I called Leandra, my only true friend, the only person in this world who had always been there. We met 30 years ago, working in the same factory. She was also a single mother. She had also been abandoned. She had also raised her children alone. We shared that silent pain that only women who have had to be both father and mother understand. Women who have had to be strong when all they wanted to do was fall apart. Leandra lives 3 blocks from my apartment in an equally old, equally sad building. When I arrived, she was making tea. She's always making tea. Says it's the only thing that calms her nerves. I sat in her kitchen. The same kitchen where we had cried together so many times. Where we had celebrated our children's birthdays when we didn't have money for big parties. Where we had planned how to survive each month on salaries that were never enough. I told her everything, every detail, from the dinner to what I'd heard in Italian, from the newspaper article to the $240,000 Raphael had in the bank. Leandra listened in silence. She didn't interrupt. She didn't judge. She just listened with that patience of people who know what real pain is. The pain that has no words. The pain that can only be shared in silence. When I finished, she set her cup on the table. She looked at me with those tired but strong eyes. And she asked me what I was going to do. I told her I didn't know, that I had the proof, that I knew the truth, but that Raphael wouldn't listen to me, that they had him completely under their control, that if I tried to stop the wedding now, I would only make my son hate me, blame me, push me away forever. Leandra nodded. Then she told me something I'll never forget. She said that mothers have always had to fight battles no one sees. That we've always had to protect our children in ways they never understand. That sometimes love means doing things that break our own hearts. Things that make us the villains of their stories. But that a true mother doesn't seek to be loved. She seeks for her children to survive. She asked if I remembered when she had to pull her eldest son out of that house where he lived with his manipulative girlfriend. Her son hated her for months. He blamed her for ruining his life, for destroying his relationship. But Leandra didn't stop. She kept fighting. She kept being there until one day her son woke up. He saw the truth. And he thanked her for saving him, for loving him enough to be the bad guy in the story. I told her this was different, that Raphael was an adult, that he was 35, that I couldn't just pull him out of there. Leandra smiled, a sad smile, and she told me that I had to be smarter then, more strategic, that I couldn't attack head-on. I had to wait for the perfect moment. The moment where the truth was so obvious that Raphael couldn't deny it. Where the proof was so overwhelming that there was no room for doubt. That afternoon, Leandra and I made a plan. A simple but effective plan. I wouldn't stop the wedding. I would let it happen. I would act like the perfect mother. Smiling, happy, invisible as always. But in the meantime, I would investigate, gather more proof. I would follow Fabiana and Alma. I would document every suspicious move, every conversation, every strange meeting. Leandra knew someone, a private investigator. His name was Theodore. He had been a cop for 20 years before retiring. Now he worked independently. He did discreet investigations, surveillance, background checks. Leandra gave me his number. She told me I could trust him, that he was a good man, that he would understand my situation. I called Theodore that same night. I explained everything. I told him I didn't have much money, that I only had my savings, $3,000 I had saved for years for emergencies. Theodore told me it was enough, that he would do what he could, that he understood what it was like to have a child in danger. He had children, too. He also knew what it meant to protect them. We met the next day at a coffee shop downtown. Theodore was a man in his 60s, grey hair, a face marked by time, but his eyes were sharp, attentive, the eyes of someone who had seen the dark side of people, who knew how to recognize danger, who knew when someone was lying. I showed him everything. The newspaper article, the photos, the notes of what I'd heard at dinner. Theodore read everything carefully. He took notes. He asked questions. He asked for addresses, full names, details about Fabiana and Alma, about Raphael, about the wedding, about everything. Then he looked at me and said something that chilled my blood. He said it was probably too late to stop the wedding, that these women were professionals, that they had years of experience, that they knew exactly how to manipulate legal situations, how to disappear without a trace. But that if we acted quickly after the wedding, if we gathered enough evidence before they started stealing the money, we could stop them. He explained that I needed hard evidence, not just the old article. I needed proof that Fabiana and Alma were still the same people from the article. Fake documents, travel records, connections to other frauds, and most importantly, I needed to record them, to capture them admitting their plan. That would be what convinced Raphael. That would be what destroyed them legally. I asked him how. How could we record them if they were suspicious of everyone? If they only spoke to each other in Italian, if I was invisible to them? Theodore thought for a moment. Then he told me that my invisibility was my greatest advantage. That people aren't careful about what they say in front of those they consider insignificant. That if I could get close to them again, if I could create a situation where they felt comfortable talking, we could capture everything. He gave me a small device, an audio recorder the size of a lighter. He explained how to use it, how to activate it without anyone noticing. He told me to carry it with me always, that if any opportunity arose to be near Fabiana and Alma, I should turn it on, that I should record everything. The story ends here, with the mother armed with a plan and a recording device, ready for the wedding and the final confrontation. Would you like me to continue the story and describe the events of the wedding and the final, planned in? This is the final chapter of the story, concluding with the climactic confrontation. The wedding day arrived, a blinding spectacle of white roses, crystal, and imported silk, Fabiana's vision of a perfect, costly fairy tale. I moved through the venue like a ghost, a barely acknowledged figure in the periphery. My task was simple: smile, nod, and maintain the illusion of the harmless, forgotten mother. But beneath my quiet dress, I wore Theodore's audio recorder, its small black casing a burning focus against my skin. It was my only defense, my secret weapon. Raphael was radiant, blindingly happy. He was the center of his own perfect storm, completely oblivious to the financial and emotional wreckage looming just beyond the honeymoon. Fabiana was majestic, playing the role of the devoted bride with breathtaking skill. Every look, every tender hand squeeze directed at Raphael was a calculated performance. The chance I was waiting for came during the reception. The music swelled, and Raphael was dragged onto the dance floor by some old college friends. Fabiana, feigning a sudden need for fresh air, motioned for Alma to follow her. They slipped onto a secluded, dimly lit stone patio. A surge of icy adrenaline shot through me. I discreetly followed, walking slowly, deliberately, pretending to inspect the floral arrangements near the exit. I rounded the corner of the wall, placing myself just out of their line of sight. My heart hammered against the tiny recorder. With a hand that was trembling but steady, I found the hidden button in the folds of my sleeve and pressed it. The soft, near-inaudible click was the loudest sound in my world.